She's back. Oh, yeah. It's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make it Locked On HBCU, your first listen of the day, every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. We'll wrap up today's episode with a little bit of pocket watching. That ain't Darian's style, I'll be honest with you, but I'm going to try a little different. And we're going to look at the salaries of men's basketball coaches, women's basketball coaches, and football coaches, in addition to ADs. But we're going to focus on the coaches primarily. In segment 2, Sam Parker is Mississippi Valley State's new offensive coordinator, and he brings one thing to the Delta Devils that they have not had in a long time. But we want to kick this thing off with the return of Tiffani-Dawn Sykes. Sykes, excuse me. I'll make sure I put the S, give some respect. We're going to kick this thing off with the return of Tiffani-Dawn Sykes. She's back. She is back. You probably know her for her time at Florida A&M. That would make the most sense. I would say that is her most prominent position and everything that came along with it. But she's back. She's back at HBCUs. She's back in a position of leadership. She's back where it all started. She's not at Florida A&M. She's at her alma mater, Virginia State, because they have just named Tiffani-Dawn Sykes as the Associate Vice President for Intercollegiate Athletics, which I was told pretty much she's going to be AD again. That's essentially what the role is going to be. That's how I heard it. But the point is that this continues a long line of leadership positions for Sykes. This continues a path that I feel like was on an upward trajectory before everything with FAMU kind of just spilled over. And that's unfortunate for her career that was such a prominent situation. But you look at her career, man, since 1997, she's been pretty HBCU centric. She was a collegiate athlete starting in 1997 with Virginia State. Then in 2001, became a graduate assistant volleyball coach, went to St. Paul's College in 2002, where she was the SID and senior women administrator, assistant athletic director. 2005, she went to Virginia Union. So you see, she's back with the HBCUs as the SID and senior women administrator again. 2009, she took over as the interim assistant sports information director, which is SID. I don't think I said that the first time, but that's what the SID stands for. 2010, she worked with the whole doggone CIAA as a sports management specialist. And also in 2010, she went to Chowan as an assistant AD for NCAA compliance. 2013, Norfolk State. She went to there to be an NCAA eligibility specialist and SI assistant, so a sports information assistant. 2017, she's back at Grand Fam, assistant AD for NCAA compliance. She goes to Dartmouth for a couple of years, associate AD for compliance, senior associate AD for varsity sports, executive senior associate athletic director for varsity sports. Good God almighty, this is a lot to say. But she's there for a few years, and then she goes to FAMU, and she's the VP and director of athletics. Then last season, she was at Maryland, where she was a player development assistant and advisor to the head coach for football. That was the one where it feels like her responsibility was a little bit lessened. But gosh, I feel like I just spent an entire segment going over the resume of Tiffani-Dawn Sykes. That's crazy. I didn't realize that it was that lengthy when I added it here. But the point is, you look at how connected that she's been to HBCUs. And quite frankly, you look at the 1 year where she was an athletic director, and it was a pretty good year. I think that it's hard to have this conversation and not feel like you're taking any kind of sides, because it does feel like there are a lot of things that happen behind the scenes that I don't even want to speak on, because I don't want to speak out of turn and be wrong, right? But the successes that Tiffani-Dawn Sykes had, they were prominent. The L was prominent too. I don't want to say the L, but everything that led to the firing was prominent as well. So you can't deny that, but I don't want to only focus on that. And I have a lot less understanding of what it is. To me, it always felt like two sides that never aligned and never saw eye to eye for whatever reason. I think it was a lot of resentment for the handling of the Willie Simmons situation. And I'm sure there was things before that, but that's what was all public. But man, in the time I knew of Sykes at FAMU, she was pretty good at her job. Like you look at some of the things that she did. Here goes the success that she's had in the nearly 2 years that she was running FAMU athletics. She was the 2024 Women's Leader Nike Executive of the Year of all FCS schools. She was the 2024 Bob Hayes Invitational Track and Field Meet Community Service Award. These awards are lengthy. Gosh, these are lengthy awards. Anyway, 2024 City of Tallahassee Community Champion Award. And then the 2023 Lights on Sports FCS Athletic Director of the Year. And that's like winning MVP as a rookie, because she came in and won that award immediately. So that to me says a lot for what she was able to do with the Rattlers. Is it an Ashley Simmons situation? Not Ashley Simmons. Ashley Robinson situation where you're pointing at that hire and that hire and that hire and that hire and that hire. Not necessarily, right? Like you're not putting all those things together. Maybe you give her the Patrick Crary one that seems like it was pretty good, but overall, that's not what you're looking for. You're just looking at, man, it felt like there was so much progress happening while she was with FAMU. That's what it just felt like to me. And I think that I can say that from the outside looking in, and without discrediting anything that could have happened disagreement wise between her and people in charge, between her and alum bases. Like I understand that people had tensions high and people had emotions, but that is not the entirety of her tenure. Not for me, and it shouldn't be for you. Instead, I'm going to look at some of these things, man, and that's the way that I look at it. Let me just say that. That's the way that I look at it. I think she showed that she is very good at this job, that she can accomplish things, that she can be successful, that things can get moving under Tiffani-Dawn Sykes. So to see her at Virginia State, it makes me happy. I've never met her personally. I've never had a conversation with her. But until everything blew up, I thought she was doing such a good job pushing FAMU forward. And I don't know where FAMU stands on the good times, because sometimes when you have a nasty breakup, after a while, you look back at the good times and you were able to see that they were good times. It's right. Like, let's say you're in a relationship and you have a bad breakup and it's like just a really ugly ending. It can sour how the entire relationship looked. And sometimes as time goes on, things don't look as sour. It's no longer that entire 2 years was just terrible. Maybe that last 3 months was bad though. It doesn't have to excuse anything that you feel like was done wrong. If you still feel like Tiffani-Dawn Sykes was kind of full of herself or whatever, was kind of hyped up on her own power, which is things that I've heard from fans, at least in the comments, you could feel that way. But in 2023, she was still AD of the year. You could feel like she did a good job that year. You can feel like she invested certain things, if that's how you feel. I'm not here to police. I think I've tried to do that before. I'm not going to do that. Family, if you want to be mad at her, that's cool. But I personally saw a lot of good in Tiffani-Dawn Sykes, so I'm excited that she was able to restart her career in a strong position of leadership and not just being a consultant, not just being an assistant to a football coach, So shout out to Tiffani-Dawn Sykes, but I want to talk about Sam Parker. This is an interesting hire because what I'm about to say is like a ceiling opposed to just a general prediction of what happens. I think that Sam Parker's ceiling brings something to Mississippi Valley State that they haven't had in a very long time, and that's winning. Let's break it down as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Fabric. Life moves fast, especially when you're a parent, especially when you're having a family. One day you're watching your kids take their first steps, and before you know it, they're off to college, which is why securing their future is so important. You know, Fabric by Gerber Life makes it simple to get term life insurance that fits your family needs. So with Fabric, you can apply for term life insurance online right from your couch. No moving around anything and be covered in less than 10 minutes. No health exam is even required. It gives you the peace of mind, affordable coverage beyond life experience insurance. Beyond life insurance, Fabric also offers free digital wills and access to investment accounts that help you plan your children's future. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their families. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/locked-on-college. That's meetfabric.com/locked-on-college. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked on HBCU, I appreciate you for making today your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked on Today. It is every story you need to know around the world in a very quick format wherever you get your podcast. Sam Parker brings one thing to Mississippi Valley State that they do not have, and that's winning. I don't think I really need to stress this, right? I don't think I need to stress how bad that Mississippi Valley State has been. I think that we've talked about this enough, but the point is they have not been competitive since I've been in college. And I started college in 2016. They have not been a team that you thought could make any noise. They're a team you've expected to be at the bottom of the conference. Like that's just not a good squad. That would need to change, right? Like that would need to change at some point. I think every year you're hoping to change. You're not just sitting here being complacent. You would hope not. But that's something that Sam Parker can help you with, ideally. Once again, I said this in the tease, but maybe you just happen to check the live show right now. What I'm about to do is talk about at its peak, the hiring of Sam Parker can help Mississippi Valley State develop a winning culture. Because Parker comes from Ferris State. And at Ferris State, they did a lot of winning. They had 3 national championships in the last 4 years, 21, 22, 24. They've been a very successful program. And this is the thing about hiring people who are moving up, people who have not had experience in the specific job, a specific role that you're hiring them for. The thing about them is that you have to hope that things they saw translate. So let's say you're getting an offensive coordinator and he's going to become your head coach. Well, you're hoping that he was a part of an offensive system that's great, naturally. So you want to have success in your role. But then also you're hoping that he comes from a place that had success. And I don't just mean on his side of the ball. You would like to see people who know how to win. I think everybody has their different preferences. It's funny. I was talking to a friend of mine today, and she was like, "Oh, bias." She tried to call me biased about something, whatever, right? And in this conversation, I was like, everybody's biased. And what I mean by that is once you have a preference, if it's strong enough, it does shape the way that you view a lot of things, which could be considered a bias depending on who it is that you're talking to. If you are, for example, some people have a bias towards offensive coaches. That's what they like. Some people have a bias towards, I don't think many people do, but some people have a bias towards defensive coaches. I think the word bias has a bad connotation, so let's just strip that word away and just say a preference, because I think a lot of times preferences are treated as a bias, right? Like if I come up here and say offensive coaches are better, you would say, well, you biased because that's what you like. Well, no, I just had a preference, and you phrased it as a bias. I hate to get into the whole semantic thing, but I do feel like a lot of times a preference is phrased as a problem when someone doesn't agree with it, whether it's a bias or whatever it may be. In these conversations, it's typically looked at, oh, you just biased. No, I'm not biased. I formed an opinion. That's all that happened here. But neither here nor there. Neither here nor there. The point is, I lean towards coaches who come from successful programs. And the reason I lean towards coaches who come from successful programs is because I'm hoping that you were able to soak up whatever information you got there. Like you look at the Sam Parker hiring. He was a run game coordinator and offensive line coach. He was an assistant, right? Now he's coming up to be a coordinator, an offensive coordinator for Mississippi Valley State. You have to hope that the things that made Ferris State's offense good, he was able to take that and say, I know how to implement it. Because it's not as if he was running his own offense. Now, if I'm going to get a guy who used to be a head coach and I want to be a head coach now, I can draw a little bit more of a straight line. If you're looking at guys who were coordinators and you want them to be coordinators again, I can draw a straight line because I know how you have experience in this specific role. That's not the case for Sam Parker, and that's not a case for a lot of people. Like for a lot of people, that just isn't the case, you know. But you're coming from Ferris State, and I'm hoping that you have history of what it looks like to win. One of my other preferences is I like coaches who have a recruiting background because to me, it'll say you know how to scout talent. You know how to bring talent in. You know how to step into a living room and say, this is the vision for my program. This is where your son or daughter fits in. So I do like coaches, head coaches, or really just coaches in general that are head coach, offensive coordinator, special teams coordinator, or defensive coordinator. One of the big four. If I can get one of the leaders of a unit or the team with recruiting experience, I love that. Preferably in the head coach because he will have to go talk to anybody. So if my offensive coordinator has a good experience with recruiting, but I need to go get a cornerback, I probably won't send my offensive coordinator. It doesn't make as much sense unless my offensive coordinator is also my recruiting specialist, right? But in general, if that's not his case, I want enough people with pull, but I'm kind of getting off base. So my apologies. But the point is, I like coaches, head coaches with strong recruiting background because now it makes me trust his ability to identify talent. When I'm talking about coaches like Sam Parker, I like them to come from a winning background because you have had experience and in his case, lengthy experience with what winning programs do, what habits, what how do you work out? Like you have these different things, and is he the head coach? No, but he can implement those things. He can bring it. And Mississippi Valley State has not won in a long time. You need somebody to show you how to win, and that starts with coaching. It starts with coaching. It's the reason why certain teams can play in a bunch of close games and lose, and certain teams can play in a bunch of close games and win. I think a lot of that comes down to coaching. I think a lot of those little small details come down to how does your head coach handle your team in these moments? The ability to close. That is something that is you have to learn. You have to learn. Pressure moments are real. You don't just play how you play in the first 45 or 45 minutes in the last quarter. You don't play how you play in the last 2 minutes. Like it's not the same. And some guys just have that clutch gene. Some people just do. And I think we all know that to be the case. But the problem with making these assumptions is that you have to understand it's not always a you first off, you might not have soaked that up. So you might not have the information in your tank that you have. But let's say you do know. Coaching is so difficult because you still got to connect with the players. And connecting, there's a science to it, I'm sure, but not many people know all the sciences. And I don't think the science works 100% of the time. Sometimes you just don't connect with that player. Like, what if he's so used to being out there at Ferris State that he comes down to Mississippi State and Valley State and he just doesn't connect right, right? So let's see. Ferris State University. Where is this at? Ferris State is in Michigan. Michigan and Mississippi, not necessarily the same. Now, I understand you're recruiting players from all over in all of these places, but where you are, it does make a difference. So you have to hope that he connects. You have to hope that the things that worked at Ferris State work with Mississippi Valley State. And sometimes talking to people who know we here to win, who know what it's about, it's way easier than talking to people who haven't been used to it because they're resistant. You're comfortable with what you know. And if what you know has led to a bunch of winning, okay, cool. It's why some people went to the Patriots and weren't able to make it because that Patriot way is different. and you knew it worked, but everybody can't step into it. But if you're ingratiated in it, makes a big difference. Anyway, that's just something I noticed. Now I want to do a little bit of pocket watching. This ain't really my stilo, but we're going to try it today. We're going to look at some of these head coaching salaries in the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference because I did come with a couple of interesting and surprising takeaways that I'll review as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. March basketball is here, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks. The best place for daily fantasy sports. With Prize Picks, you can pick more or less on at least 2-player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. It's fast, easy, and keeps every game exciting. Listen, let's build a couple of lineups. Maybe I'm looking at Jason Tatum for more than 29 points and Zion Williamson for more than 10 rebounds, right? Let's just say that I haven't checked out my Prize Picks app today to get the specific numbers, but that could be realistic. You do that and I win, I can win multiple, like maybe 1,000, 100 times my cash just by picking those two guys correctly. Download the app today and use the code Locked On College to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code Locked On College for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. Whew. Pocket watching is not my thing. I keep saying it because it's so strange. And I made a whole segment about pocket watching, but that's what we're going to do. We're going to start clocking how much people make. It's funny because in general, this is not something that I would bring to the show. But the reason I brought it is because I was surprised that the amount of men's basketball coaches who were making more than football coaches. And I don't know if you would be surprised by that, but I think that there are people who would think like me that football is the money generator. Football is the cash cow of the university. You would think and assume that their coaches would get paid more than other coaches. If you knew this, great. Let's just get the specific numbers. If you didn't, and this is an eye-opening moment like it was for me, let's have fun together. And I'm just going to list them off and I'll kind of funnel back. But Michael Vick at Norfolk State makes $400,000 on the dot. Chinnisberry makes $300,000 on the dot. Trey Oliver at North Carolina Central, Chinnisberry at South Carolina State, of course, but Trey Oliver at Central makes $289,224 a year. Damon Wilson makes $274,000 on the dot. Delaware State with Deshaun Jackson not available. Larry Scott with Howard not available. I think Howard just isn't giving out these numbers because they didn't give any of them. And I think Delaware State, they're on the fence because they gave out their head coach. They gave out their head coach for men's basketball, but that's about it. They didn't do it for anything else. So maybe they just weren't able to find that, but I don't know. I'm going off of this was an HBCU Game Day article. Then Robert Jones at Norfolk State gets paid $435,766 a year. Kevin Broadus from Morgan State gets paid $381,000 a year. Lavelle Moulton, he gets paid $369,332. Then Eric Martin at South Carolina State gets $210 on the dot, and Stan Waterman gets $170 on the dot. Women's basketball, Larry Vickers, Norfolk State, $214.2 thousand. You're looking at Timothy Eatman at South Carolina State, $173 on the dot. Terrence Baxter at Central, $162 on the dot. I'm not even going to get to the ADs because I don't think the ADs are important here, to be honest. I was so fascinated at the amount of money that the men's basketball coaches were getting paid. You look at it, Robert Jones makes more than Michael Vick, and that was extremely surprising to me because Vick was going to get that bag, and he did. He's the highest paid head coach in the MEAC, and I think he's one of the highest paid head coaches in all of FCS football. But you look at Robert Jones, $435,766. So that's that's $35,766,000 more than Michael Vick. Chennis Berry is making more than his head coach, but that's because Stan Waterman barely making, or excuse me, no, Eric Martin making a decent amount. He making an okay amount. I'll say that. Stan Waterman, he ain't making nothing. You got two women's basketball head coaches who's making more than him. I'm just saying. Larry Vickers making more than Martin. But you look at Lavelle. Now, Lavelle, it's interesting because you look at it, Norfolk State, they got Robert Jones. They got Larry Vickers. Those should be the highest paid head coaches, right? Like that just makes a lot of sense. You look at Lavelle, he's been essential forever. He's been essential for a decade and a half. He's the most winningest head coach in school history. He has all of these things working for him. So it makes sense that he get paid more than Trey Oliver. But I still feel like Trey Oliver is getting paid a little less than he should because he has a Celebration Bowl victory. And I think he got extended afterwards. Chennis Berry came in 2 years later. So him being about 11,000 above him, I guess it makes sense. But Damon Wilson being at $274,000, being very close to Trey Oliver, that's why I feel like Trey Oliver should have a pay raise. I'm just saying, he's accomplished way more. His teams have been extremely competitive, while Morgan State has seemed like they're just one side of the ball away. And I mean, yeah, that sounds cool, but if you're talking about one side of the ball, that's actually a pretty far distance. But you just look at it, it's interesting to me, man. Like this was fascinating. Larry Vickers, $214,000 to $200. Every step of the way. Now, when you get to ADs, Norfolk State is second. Morgan State blew a bag on their AD, which I guess you can do when other people ain't that high. But Morgan State is the highest paid women's basketball, men's basketball, and football head coach. But Robert Jones is the highest paid coach in the MEAC, at least by what is openly shared. Maybe the Howard guys or girls are a little bit more paid, but they didn't reveal that. So, of reported numbers, Norfolk State dishes out the most money to anybody. They lead the candidates in every single category. So I thought that was cool. I thought you might want to know. I thought that would be fun for you guys to hear. I won't do this too much, just to be honest. I will not do this too much. I doubt I would do this with the SWAC if it comes up, unless something was just so fascinating like this. But because now I see coaches on the men's basketball ranks getting paid more than head coaches on the football ranks, it would take a lot to surprise me. Pocket watching is not my thing, but I think that it was overall a solid end to the week. So in the meantime, in between time, Finance Friday. No, just kidding. We're not going to make it a thing. In the meantime, in between time, until next time that we hear each other, family, take care. Stay blessed. Peace.